This session is about what do we do after we build that self-command muscle, where we have developed the control to notice our negative thought patterns, our saboteurs as they're coming up and trying to sabotage a situation. We've noticed them. We've gotten curious about them to say, what is this pointing me to? Is this actually pointing me to something that's useful, i.e., my hand is on a burning stove and I should remove it? Or is this pointing me to some old story from my childhood that's not applicable anymore? Or even just an old situation with a relationship that's not applicable anymore? Whatever the case may be, once we get curious about it and we want to create some positive momentum, we want to have something that we can do that's useful to it, this is where we want to start activating these other more positive thought patterns, or what we call the sage voice. Sages, as I mentioned earlier in the intro, are considered voices of wisdom. An inner wisdom is what we're looking for here. There is a collection of 5 sage voices that are presented by positiveintelligence.com. And I don't think these are all inclusive of every single way that you could harness positive momentum forward. I've used other tools with my clients that have been more around how do we create crew members that could be of different use and patterns that would help you move forward more positively. There's lots of different ways to tackle this, but if we start first with just the information and guidance from positiveintelligence.com, we have 5 of these sage voices that we could try to engage to create a different perspective about that moment, a different perspective about how we're going to move forward and try to create something new and different. Now, you'll notice that I've put the empathizer in the middle and I've made it bigger than the others. That's a bit of my perspective and maybe a little bit less what you might get from Sirzad. The empathizer is one that I think has this space that if you can learn to use the power of the empathizer, it could become like that medicine that cures just about everything. It could, whether it be aspirin or Tylenol or Advil or whatever you're thinking of as that particular treatment, that arnica. Pick whatever medicine is your preference. But if it's that go-to thing that if something hurts, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try that. I'm going to take a little bit of arnica. That's the power, I believe, of the empathizer. And so that's why I put that one in the center and why I make it a little bit bigger. It can be sometimes one of the harder ones for people to build that muscle. But once you've built it, it can be one of the more powerful ones. But that might not be true for you. You may listen as I go through each one and describe what they are and how you activate them. You might find that there's another sage that will be your go-to sage voice when you are trying to shift your perspective into something that's more useful, that's more positive. So let's just start with the empathizer at the beginning and look at what does the empathizer tell us. And so at a basic level, the empathizer is this place of how can we create more compassion for others and more compassion for ourselves. It's this place of, can you have empathy for others? Can you generate more empathy for others? Maybe someone has treated you unfairly and you're upset with them. What's the most generous assumption that you can have in that moment that can allow you to have more compassion and empathy for them in that moment? That could allow you for just a little bit to not be defensive and take on that victim mindset potentially, that hypervigilant mindset potentially, that controller, that perfectionist, whatever that might be, the stickler, and just for a moment say, I'm just going to try to have the most generous assumption in this moment about this person, about this situation, and have as much compassion and empathy as I can. Sometimes that needs to be directed to you. How can you have more empathy for yourself? And often you can visualize yourself as a child. Visualize yourself in a setting where, you're doing the best you can, and it could be good to really make sure you already have an idea of What is that most honest, simple version of yourself as a child where you were really at your essence, where you really were able to shine through? I also find a good trick that I use often with my clients when it comes to the empathizer is who's someone that you know that's able to do this really well, a person in your life that they seem to have so much compassion for others, or they have so much compassion, self-compassion for themselves. They're really good at providing unconditional caring and empathy. Can you, in a moment when you're wanting to get connected to the empathizer sage, actually leverage them? Remember who they are, hold their name in your head, their face in your head, whatever that might be, but leverage their mindset in that moment so that that can create positive momentum for you in that situation. The conditions of that moment, the environment of that moment, we can't change those, but we can change our perspective about how we're looking at that moment. And when we do that, more options become available to us. A final little space to think about when you're trying to activate self-compassion for yourself. What would the people in your life who love you the most say to you in this moment? What would they offer to you as kind words? So this is our empathizer. If we continue looking at the next, it would be the navigator. And the navigator is a really, really helpful sage voice, particularly if you have also done the work to make sure you really understand your values and what are your key anchors in life. So it's a great tool to use when you have a big decision, you're trying to figure out how to prioritize. It's looking and flashing forward and imagining, all right, what direction do I need to go? What action do I need to take? And if I can leverage my values as an example, how is this decision honoring that value? And does that inform me in the path that I should take? You could flash forward to 5 minutes from now. Is this really going to matter? 5 days from now, 5 weeks from now, 5 months from now, 5 years from now? It's a lovely trick that I believe I heard Oprah Winfrey speak to one time that someone gave to her. But if you're in a moment, if you flash forward and you're trying to get yourself out of a negative thought pattern, if I flash forward 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, does this really matter? And if it matters, if 5 minutes from now, this is going to really matter, 5 days from now, this is going to really matter, then that's your clue that you need to get everybody that you can and all the resources you can to address that situation. But if in flashing forward, you're like, you know what, this isn't that big of a deal in the big scheme of things. And oh, it actually doesn't help me honor my values anymore. It doesn't help me honor my value of spending time with my family. It doesn't help me honor my value of wanting to be a leader that's more thoughtful and listening and compassionate. It doesn't honor my value of wanting to be an adventurer. Whatever it is your value. If this doesn't honor it, then that can give you some sense of direction of how you can move forward. So that's our navigator sage wide voice that can help you in moments where you might be struggling, whether that be avoiding, this is a typical good one if you're in an avoidance saboteur that's coming up. If you're a pleaser saboteur that's coming up and you're realizing finally that you can't please everybody, the navigator can be quite useful in trying to figure out, well, who should I be pleasing? Where should I be focusing my attention and time? Because I know I can't please everybody. Now there's the activator. And the activator is this space where there's a couple of things you can look at the activator for. One is, can you use the activator to preempt saboteurs? Can you think about something that's going to happen in the future and you're anticipating where your saboteurs might come in and try to sabotage the situation, right? So how can you anticipate what they're going to say to you? What whisper or moment are they going to come and tell you lies about how you should do this or you're not good enough to do that? Can you think about how you're going to intercept that and address it in the moment? Can you predict and prepare where that might be? Something simple could be just the noticing of a saboteur and just actually making fun of it, making light of it. Oh, this is that nasty stickler again talking to me. You funny stickler, you can just go on back to bed. Now that may seem silly to you, but in your head, that lightning of the moment can be quite good. You can come up with whatever you want to. It could be, I'm going to preemptively think about my saboteurs. And when I hear that nasty voice, I'm going to do 5 jumping jacks, or I'm going to do some PQ reps. It doesn't really matter. I also like to think of the activator as in the moment. If I hear it, what action am I going to take? What small little incremental action am I going to take to move me forward to something positive? There was a really great tip that was given to me from a colleague once where they were trying to build a habit of just activity. Actually, they were trying to build a walking habit. And they had this simple tip that was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And it was just that simple step of counting backwards. And their commitment to themselves is when they got to 1, they would take action. They would do something. If they were deciding whether or not they should get up and go for a walk, they didn't debate. They just went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they got up and walked. So that could be a great little technique you use to activate some energy in yourself to move forward. But I love the question as well as what's just the most simplest, smallest thing I can do right now to create some positive momentum? What's the most useful thing I can do to move forward? You don't need to have 100 task plan, project plan. Sometimes we can get so built up on having everything figured out before we move forward. Can we just figure out what's the thing I could do right now in this moment? What's one thing I can do in this hour? What's one thing I can do in this day? And not think about the next thing. Just think about the action I can take right now to try to create some positive momentum. So whether you're using the activator to preempt future saboteurs, or you're in the moment and you're just trying to simplify it to something that's one simple action, the activator can be a quite powerful sage to get you out of that negative thought pattern, whatever that happens to be for you. Then there's the innovator. The innovator can be quite a lot of fun. This is, sort of like the scientist that is looking around for everything and saying yes and just coming up with many ideas that they can. This concept of yes and comes from the field of improv. And it's this place of someone gives an idea and you may think that's the dumbest idea in the world. But instead of making any comment about this, whether that idea is good or not good, you just say yes. And what I love about that idea is whatever, right? And then you add to that idea. And so with the innovator approach, it's really about how you can appreciate every idea. It's the ultimate brainstorming. So rather than judging every idea before the next idea that comes through, or you're trying to figure out all the different ways that you're going to react to, or why that idea is not going to be good or bad, the idea here is just rapid idea generation. How can you come up with as many ideas as possible to create a different perspective about this moment, to come up with what's the most useful action you could take? You can do this on your head and on your own, or you can do it in a team setting. I also love the question of, well, what if I had a magic wand? If I had a magic wand and I could do anything, if there were no constraints, absolutely no constraints at all, what idea might I come up with? And your goal is just to come up with lots of ideas. At some other point, you can judge the ideas and figure out which ones you are. But while you're still in that negative pattern, if you're judging, you're limiting the possibility of the idea really staring you right in the face. So that's our innovator sage. And then our last is the explorer, or the fascinated anthropologist. As the explorer, you're really trying to be a keen observer of simply what is. You're just trying to collect data. So unlike the innovator, where you're trying to generate new ideas, the explorer is just collecting as much data as they can. So they might be looking for similar data. They're looking for contrary data. How many data points can I collect on this situation? Not judge them, not try to change them, not try to control them, but just discover them. Just discover everything that's happening in this moment. Maybe you're feeling quite tense and anxious. Can you notice everything about this moment, everything about the day that led up to this moment? What's all the data that I can collect without judging it, without judging that I'm feeling anxious, without judging anything about this moment, the people that I'm with? I'm just examining it and collecting as much data as I can and getting curious. I'm really just being super curious about this moment and seeing if that would help me. If I go back to the analogy of the stove, it's quite easy to figure out, again, the data to tell me that my hand is on a burning stove, and that's what's causing the pain in my hand. When we're talking about emotional pain and we're talking about thought patterns, it's not that simple. There's usually not a burning stove that makes it super obvious that that's the thing that's causing us pain. So the explorer allows us to do a little bit more of that digging, so they can really see. We often can collude ideas and think, oh, this is the thing that's causing me pain. This person over here is being really annoying, and that's why I'm so frustrated and short-tempered. When actually, if I was to do some exploring and getting curious, I might realize I forgot to have lunch today. I haven't drunk enough water today. I didn't get enough sleep last night. That's why I'm annoyed right now. That's why I don't have a lot of patience. It has very little to do with this person at all. So use the explorer to really examine the moment, examine the situation, and see where there's data that can help inform you, advise you in a better way than what your immediate reaction might have been, which often involves those nasty saboteurs. So we've gone through and looked at all of these saboteur or all these sages to give you the opportunity to get familiar with it and comfortable with them. Remember, the first goal is about practicing your PQ reps and building that self-command muscle. And then once you've gotten command, once you've been able to notice, oh, there's a nasty saboteur that's up, and you've been able to pause, then it's like, okay, which sage voice do I want to invoke? Who do I want to help me in this situation, to help me create and shift my perspective in this moment to something that is more useful, that's going to create some positive momentum for me? That's where you really raise your PQ quotient, your PQ score, when you're able to pivot quickly from negative thought patterns to these other thought patterns that are more useful. Then that's the space where you're not wasting time being mad and angry. You're not wasting time being frustrated. You're not wasting time being indecisive. You're not wasting time avoiding and procrastinating. You're noticing whatever thought pattern was there that wasn't useful, and then you're finding a new thought pattern that can create positive momentum forward. And so hopefully one of these 5 sage voices will help you with that. If not, that's certainly an opportunity for some one-on-one coaching to consider it in more detail and where we can create more resonance for you in either one of these sages or another strategy that's going to help you create that positive momentum for yourself.